In the pitch black of night, the only noise in Phoenix Foxtrot was the clanging of metal crashing upon metal. Ethan Riles was spending the wee hours of the morning adding the final touches to the Phoenix Project's latest development, a third Manticore. When it was done, the project's reach would expand even further across the globe. In part, Ethan couldn't sleep because this project was so close to completion, but the more pressing reason he was smashing steel while the rest of the base slept was simply because he couldn't sleep. In fact, he had been unable to sleep more than an hour at a time since he had obtained the Aspida. Something about coming face to face with the Pandorans. He had never seen one in the flesh before, and the experience had changed him. Every time he closed his eyes, even just to blink, there they were. The eyes dribbling with pus, and the bubbling putrid flesh of the creatures, their rancid tentacles reaching out to claim him. It was too terrible to speak of. Ethan could feel his sanity slipping away. He was, in his mind, already dead. His body just had a bit of catching up to do. And until it did, he was determined to assist the project as much as he could, while he could. Ethan gasped loudly, halting his bashing on the Manticore's underbelly. He had heard something. Straining his ears, his eyes widened, and he ran to the command center. A small red light was blinking on the console in unison with a static beeping sound. A distress call was inbound. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Dante Cassius and Hannah Barrett were awoken from their slumber by a metal banging of their own. It was the Hammer, pounding his fist on the door. Very rarely a jovial man, the glee in his voice was obvious on this occasion. He had received a tip-off that a Forsaken assault team was planning to raid a New Jericho research facility. Cassius was equally pleased at the news. This was a chance to not only begin making amends with Tobias West after Sophia had gone out of her way to antagonize the man, but it was also a chance for revenge. The Forsaken, those psychotic Anu outcasts, were the reason Cassius's team had been unable to assist in defending Phoenix Point when it came under attack. They were the reason so many had died on that terrible day. Cassius relished the opportunity to be the reason the Forsaken would face a similar fate on this day. Bravo Squad instantly set out in the Manticore. This time they would be the ones laying the ambush. On their way to the site, they received a transmission from a very distressed-sounding Ethan. He was begging for their assistance as a group of scavengers had radioed him, claiming to be surrounded by Pandorans. They wouldn't last the night. Cassius offered his regrets in the softest way he could, which, by most people's standards, wasn't soft at all, and said they would get there as soon as they could, but the current mission took priority. Ethan suggested he could rescue the scavengers himself. Cassius forbid such a thing, stating Ethan would die too. Cassius said he needed Ethan safe, and that the reality of war was that you couldn't save everyone. He apologized to the young engineer. And so Ethan was left with the choice almost every man must face at least once in his life: to do what he is told, or to do what is right. As the sun rose, Bravo Squad deployed at the research facility and quickly took up position on the roof. Evelyn was breathing heavily almost immediately. Her movements were much slower than usual. No doubt the corruption from her encounter with the Acheron was still affecting her. Evelyn, demonstrating her usual hardiness, assured the team she was fine. Cassius had his doubts, but he trusted Evelyn enough to abide by her judgment. The site was top secret, and, as such, the number of personnel on the grounds was minimal. Security and research staff only. Nevertheless, the Forsaken had somehow learned of its existence and smashed through New Jericho's defenses using the ungodly abilities of their priests. Mutated humans who could mind control other people. Cassius had heard of these Anu abominations, but had never seen one in the flesh. The priests were commanding the New Jericho soldiers to execute themselves, and the Haven personnel were complying, without argument or fear, just matter-of-factly blowing their brains out all over the sidewalk, like it was nothing. Cassius noticed the quiver in Hannah's throat. The slaughter was like nothing they had ever witnessed. The captain commanded his team not to get close to the priests. For all their tricks, they didn't know Bravo Squad was waiting for them. Cassius had deliberately not informed New Jericho of their presence, as he suspected they would not have been welcome. If this mission went well, they would be heroes to Tobias West. If it went badly, they would be at war with him. The stakes were as high as they could be. There was no room for error. And so the trap was sprung. Ellis launched a grenade at one of the foot soldiers, hulking brutes and no easy foe in their own right, while Hannah made contact with the civilians inside. Cassius and the two snipers began pelting the priest with gunfire. Eileen scored a devastating blow, removing a huge chunk of the priest's mutated cranium. It wouldn't be mind-controlling anyone else after that. What Cassius didn't know was a second priest was already inside the building. Without even seeing them, as if it could sense their presence, the abomination flooded the minds of Hannah and the civilians with terrifying images of their demise. Hannah erupted in a blood-curdling scream and threw herself into a corner, babbling mindlessly to "Get it away! Get it away!" Every instinct Cassius had told him to race towards Hannah, to protect what was most precious to him in the entire world. But he knew that was what the Forsaken wanted. Force the team to break position and then encircle them. An obvious ploy, and he was not going to fall for it. Instead, Cassius ordered Evelyn and Eileen to cover the stairwell of the building. Nothing would be reaching Hannah or the civilians who were with her. Meanwhile, he pummeled the outside priest with laser fire, ripping what was left of the demented freak into nothing but a lifeless husk. The screams of the civilians on the bottom floor rang out across the research station as the Forsaken berserkers reached them. No doubt a slaughter was occurring within the facility walls, but again, this was bait, and Cassius was far too experienced to fall for the trap. He knew in war, you only saved the people you could. The Phoenix captain took command of the civilians on the secured second floor, assuring them they would survive if they followed his instructions. Keeping these people from panicking was a top priority, and soon his plan worked. One of the Forsaken berserkers, perhaps growing impatient, perhaps having a false sense of dominance on the battlefield, came barreling up the stairs where it was quickly riddled with gunfire. As the battle swung in Bravo Squad's favour, Hannah regained her senses and took the fight to the priest who had psychically attacked her. A well-placed grenade from Ellis ruptured the mutant's skull, rendering its mind abilities useless as well. Hannah then rained bullets down on the priest, before the hammer came charging through the garage, knocking what was left of its head right off its shoulders. The Forsaken strike team had been vanquished. While the majority of the team attended to the civilians, Ellis and Evelyn managed to secure a copy of the data files on the facility's hard drives. They were shocked to discover the information contained within. Extensive research into cybernetic augmentations of human beings. The same research that had led to the creation of the Pure. Even now, after seeing how demented and violent the mechanical beings had become, West insisted on pursuing this research. Perhaps he was as mad as Sophia claimed after all. Evelyn raised an even more pressing concern. Why had the Forsaken attacked this place? Was it simply a mindless strike to cause fear? Or were the Forsaken trying to obtain the research for themselves? What would happen if they were to combine their mutant powers with the sheer toughness of the Pure's cybernetic bodies? It was a scenario no one on the team enjoyed considering. They were simply happy they had repelled the invaders on this day. Bravo Squad escorted the remaining scientists onto the Manticore, offering them and their families a choice of living with the Phoenix Project or obtaining new identities with Synedrion. The group then quickly evacuated the site. The squad was in agreement that it was better if Tobias West did not learn of their presence in this place. Rather than being grateful, he would surely only be suspicious. Meanwhile, many leagues away, Ethan had decided what type of man he was. Ethan quickly disembarked from the Chaos buggy and made contact with the scavengers. He was not a moment too soon, as Pandoran monstrosities were quickly surrounding the building. They descended upon Ethan and the scavengers, a Triton promptly shredding Ethan's left arm, leaving the bone protruding from his flesh and the appendage now completely useless. No longer being able to wield his rifle, Ethan climbed back into the Chaos buggy. The group rallied around the vehicle as its savage firepower repelled the attackers. Once the initial wave of abominations had been felled, the group was forced to make a desperate dash through open terrain and barrages of enemy fire to reach safety. Mindfraggers, Tritons, and Arthrons descended upon the group like vultures to roadkill. The scavengers began to panic, but Ethan assured them they would be fine if they just kept moving. He would cover them, no matter the cost. And so the group charged ahead, the Chaos buggy pulverizing any Pandorans that got too close. While the group sustained heavy injuries, they all made it out with their lives. A feat that Ethan, if he was truly being honest with himself, had certainly not expected. Over the coming days, the scavengers had decided to remain at Phoenix Foxtrot. The leader of the trio was Sam Dyson, an expert marksman who had honed his skills as a child with a BB gun and a great deal of stolen paint cans. Emil Ramirez was a quiet man who served as the group's heavy support. Dan Stevens was an elderly fellow who, despite having lived well past the average in the New World, was still one of the toughest men walking the globe. In his time, he had slain dozens of Pandorans, some with nothing more than his bare hands and teeth. The civilians at Phoenix Foxtrot had been very welcoming of the trio. Foxtrot was a long way from Phoenix Point, and having some personnel in the base with real-world combat experience seemed to be comforting to a lot of them. They felt safer having the three wanderers amongst their ranks. Sam approached Ethan, asking how the progress on the Manticore was travelling. Ethan said the base's manufacturing AI took care of the heavy lifting. He was just overseeing the more delicate aspects of the construction, the parts that needed the finesse of a human hand. Sam asked if the vehicle was flight ready, to which Ethan told him it was. Sam then informed Ethan that they had located another scavenging site and it'd be a good test flight for the Manticore. Ethan protested, saying Cassius would shoot him if he engaged Pandorans without permission again. Sam reminded Ethan that Cassius had explicitly threatened to shoot him in the leg, nothing that he couldn't recover from. Sam said they needed their team leader for the mission. It took an embarrassingly long time for Ethan to realise Sam was referring to him, Ethan the engineer, as the team leader. Ethan hurriedly disagreed, insisting he was no leader, but Sam disagreed entirely. Ethan was the one who had saved them, who had brought them out of the wilderness and into the Phoenix Project. Sam also stated that if Ethan was being honest with himself, they both knew there was nothing Ethan wanted more in the world than to eradicate some more Pandorans. The young engineer momentarily mulled over his options before firing up the engines of the Manticore. Sam spoke with a sly grin across his face. "We'll call her the Ethan Express." Across the world, on another continent, Sophia led Alpha Squad on the Phoenix Point's next great crusade. In truth, it was nothing like she expected. She had imagined soaring across the skies at the side of Randolph Symes, conquering Pandorans and reclaiming the globe. A glorious act of defiance in the face of a truly evil foe. But in reality, there was nothing glorious about it. The team had been cramped up in the Manticore for over a week. Limited space, limited resources, and limited patience. Their moods had soured and their patience was thinning. Sophia had withdrawn to the cockpit, rarely speaking to the group unless to bark at them in annoyance. She needed off this ship. They all did. Sophia was flooded with relief when Cassius contacted her over the radio. He had a mission for Alpha Squad. Anything to get off this accursed ship was welcome, even if it was to face a hostile and deadly enemy. The Synedrions had once again been caught up in one of their debates, as they called them. one faction advocating for coexistence with the Pandorans, the other wanting to terraform the Earth and dominate the Pandorans. Sophia and Cassius agreed on very little, but this dispute was one of the rare times they found some common ground. Neither was interested in coexistence. Alpha Squad would be assisting the terraformers on this day. The mission was simple. So simple, Sophia rolled her eyes at the Synedrion's inability to handle the matter themselves. The objective was to plant several seeds the Synedrions had developed deep within Pandoran territory. Synedrion would monitor the growth of the seeds to determine if they were truly as resistant to the virus as initial analysis suggested. The moment Alpha Squad touched down, Pandorans began charging towards them, no less than what the team expected. But the beasts were growing in strength. Some of them had incorporated mutated grenade launchers into their arms. They could launch organic explosives at will. It was a frightening development. But no matter how much power their foe gained, Alpha Squad would meet them head on. The team was too determined, and too frustrated, to concede now. They pushed on, wiping out the Pandorans and planting the seeds. The team could hear more of the creatures stirring in the distance. Sophia was tempted to await their arrival, but the team managed to talk her into returning to the Manticore. After all, this mission was only a secondary objective. Their primary goal still lay before them, finding Symes. Sophia saw their wisdom, and Alpha Squad continued on their journey. And sure enough, they had soon reached the final set of coordinates left behind by their leader. The site was an old government facility, a top-secret one according to Symes' notes. The team moved in, but quickly found the campus was no longer a secret. It had been overtaken by bandits. The situation seemed dire for Alpha Team. They were pinned down at the entrance of the facility, sniper rifle and heavy machine gun fire raining down on them. But Sophia had not travelled halfway across the globe to be denied now. She commanded the team to break through the enemy's line. The bandits had made a crucial mistake in this engagement. The snipers, either from arrogance or ignorance, had moved out beyond the building's walls. Being faster than their heavy compatriots, they had pushed forward too quickly. This ragtag group of bandits didn't understand the nuance of combat formations. Omar and Irina annihilated the sniper on the right. Takeshi, once again having the Maker's shotgun at his disposal, pushed up the left side and put down the second sniper. Jacob and Sophia were then able to push forward quickly enough to keep themselves out of reach of the slow-moving heavy cannon fire. Takeshi was able to blast one of the heavies, the acid-infused rounds of his shotgun turning the bandit's armour to a hot sludge. Jacob then moved in with the new Razor to stun the raider, leaving him paralysed. This gave Sophia and Takeshi ample time to end the bandits' existence. The vagabonds did try flanking Irina and Omar, but a barrage of grenades sent them fleeing from the battlefield. Alpha Squad seemed to have the area secure until a single grenade came tumbling out of the building behind Sophia. She took the brunt of the blast, but the toughness of her living armour absorbed the blow and kept her safe. From behind the scattering debris he emerged. A rogue Anu berserker, no doubt the leader of this group. He charged towards the squad, swinging his mighty warhammer and screaming like a madman. Takeshi only smirked as he raised his shotgun. In this case, bringing a hammer to a gunfight proved to be a losing strategy. With the raiders disposed of, Sophia hurried into the deepest recesses of the facility's remains. Her heart was pounding as she burst into the research area. What she feared above all else was finding Symes' lifeless body. She breathed a sigh of relief as there appeared to be no signs of violence within the facility itself. It seemed the bandits had arrived after Symes' visit.
In the 1960s, the Phoenix Project clashed with an unknown intelligence outfit associated with the CIA. One of these clashes concerned the cultures stored in this lab, said to be responsible for a terrible plague somewhere in what was then called the Third World. At the time of his death, my great-grandfather was trying to force the CIA to at least share some samples, but they denied everything, even the existence of this lab. It looks like the research was abandoned in the late 1970s. I'm not sure why. The samples are degraded, but if my analysis is correct, this is the Pandora virus. Sometimes I wonder whether the only reason we survived as a species is sheer luck.
Sophia felt a strange combination of relief, frustration, and curiosity. The samples inside the remains of the lab seemed to be of the Pandora virus, but they were nearly 100 years old, from a time long before the collapse of the world. How was this possible? The notion that the government of a world superpower had known about the Pandora virus and yet not taken sufficient steps to combat it, such a thought was inconceivable. But there was no time to ponder such things now. Jacob was able to access the computer's log files. It seemed the previous user, who was almost certainly Symes, had accessed information regarding a fourth location. The squad's next destination was set. However, before the team could continue their pursuit of Symes, Sophia reminded them they needed to secure the next of Danchev's living weapons. Jacob attempted to persuade Sophia away from such a course, telling her that finding Symes was more important, but the squad leader would have none of it. She was adamant the living weapons would be vital in turning the tide of the war against the Pandorans. And so Alpha Squad deployed again, this time into a massive underground structure that no doubt housed unspeakable evils. Unlike Danchev's previous research site, the Pandorans here were aggressive. They swarmed Alpha Squad from multiple sides, attempting to flank the group. The team held the line, punishing any of the beasts foolish enough to come too close. By now they had become experts in targeting the Pandorans' weak spots. The team was feeling confident as they continued painting the ground of the cavern with Pandoran organs. "We'll run out of ammo at this rate," Omar joked. He then turned to Sophia, whose face sunk in unison with his. They had experienced this before. A seemingly endless horde of Pandorans. An infinite wave of the creatures crashing upon them. The only time they had seen Pandoran activity this high was in the presence of an Acheron. And sure enough, the creature emerged from beyond the rocky cover of the cave system. Omar was overcome with dread. How had one of these things travelled so far in such a short time? It was impossible. He screamed at the team that they had to retreat. When Omar looked at Sophia, he saw no fear in her. She replied that the team was to move in. They were taking this creature alive. Omar couldn't believe his leader's recklessness. To go anywhere near that thing was surely suicide. Sophia said she would do it alone if she had to, and charged towards the monstrous entity. Omar swore under his breath before launching a grenade at the Acheron. Weakening the beast first was the most sensible approach, and the only one they had if they wanted to survive. Jacob similarly pummeled the Acheron's head with gunfire, disabling its psychic ability to summon reinforcements. No further Pandorans would be coming to save it today. The creature violently lashed out, spasming at the area all around it. It sensed it was in danger. Its fears were proven right as Jacob charged in, smashing his new razor deep into the thick, leathery flesh of the monster. As he did so, purple gunk sprayed over him, the same substance that had afflicted Evelyn with corruption. Omar used his jetpack to barrel in and suppress the foe with a mighty war cry. Takeshi held off the last of the Pandoran reinforcements, while Sophia also charged the Acheron with her new razor. The trio kept pummeling the monstrosity, all of them being soaked in rancid purple ooze. But sure enough, through sheer force of will, they overpowered the Acheron and brought it to submission. With the battle won, Jacob and Omar collapsed to the ground and began violently vomiting. The corruption had infected them. Sophia, the veins in her head bulging and throbbing, her eyes turning a deep red, remained on her feet and pushed further into the cavern. As if she knew exactly where the artifact lay, she quickly came across the Danchev AR. She told Takeshi and Irina it was beautiful, before collapsing in exhaustion herself. And so it was left to Takeshi and Irina to secure the beast to the underside of the Manticore and fly the squad to the nearby Phoenix outpost entitled PHB-2. The base's AI would be able to use the blueprints of the Phoenix Point containment facility to establish a sufficient holding cell for the creature. and if it couldn't, Jacob joked they could just find a large hole to throw the Acheron in. Then he lost consciousness. Takeshi and Irina spent the next several days in PHB-2, tending to their recovering squad mates. While the trio of corrupted soldiers rested, Irina expressed her concern to Takeshi. She noted that Sophia was becoming more unstable as each day passed. Takeshi understood her concerns, but assured Irina that Sophia's heart was in the right place. He said the best thing they could do for her is to remain by her side. While she was too proud to admit it, Sophia needed her squad mates more than anything in the world. On the other side of the globe, the occupants of the Ethan Express disembarked at their scavenging site. Upon arrival, they encountered a lone wanderer by the name of Maddie Sampson. She too was after the supplies the site contained. She warned the group that Pandoran presence in the area was dense. It was why she had held off from venturing any further. Ethan proposed they work together and share the reward. Maddie agreed, and the team readied for combat. Maddie's assessment of the situation proved correct, as the Pandoran presence was indeed threatening. There were 2 mist spreaders, looking to consume the area at twice the pace as usual. As the fighting began, Ethan quickly understood how Maddie had survived in the wilderness on her own. She was an expert in stealth, being able to remain undetected by the Pandorans far longer than the rest of the group. Maddie and Dan moved up the left side of the ruins, while the rest of the group took to the right. Dan was consumed by a mind fragger, and Maddie found herself poisoned by an Artheron. Using the last bolt in her crossbow, she freed Dan of the mind fragger. Having no other way to defend herself, she charged the Artheron and bludgeoned its face in with her bow. Dan had a medkit to cure the poison coursing through Maddie's veins as the team regrouped. Their teamwork was exceptional. The group gathered the majority of the supplies while holding off the Pandorans, but Ethan could tell the creatures were beginning to overwhelm them. No doubt the scavengers were too proud to admit when they were outclassed, but Ethan had no such flaw. He told his new acquaintances it was time to leave, and the group, to his surprise, told him that was a good decision. They quickly fell back to the Manticore with their new goods in hand. Maddie joined the group on the Manticore as the vehicle carried them to safety. It was only as he was piloting the vehicle back to Phoenix Foxtrot did the true gravity of Ethan's situation dawn on him. He had violated the direct order of the Phoenix Project commander, not to mention said commander was a psychopath. And Ethan had done all of this on a whim. He began to panic. How could he be so stupid? What was wrong with him? Sam seemed to detect his anxiety and tried comforting the young engineer. He told Ethan that Cassius would surely understand when he saw the loot they had recovered. He would see that Ethan is more than capable of field work. Ethan rebutted, saying Cassius had fed a group of people to the captive Pandorans in Phoenix Point. The man was deranged. Ethan had to get as far away from the project as he possibly could. Maddie stated her next destination was the Anu Haven of Azupiranu. She knew some traders there that could help them lay low for a while, if the group wanted her help. Ethan wasn't sure he could trust Maddie, but he was willing to take a chance. Surely it couldn't be any worse than having Cassius shoot him. The Ethan Express did a hard pivot and began racing away from Phoenix Foxtrot. From this moment on, there was no going back for Ethan Riles. He did what? Cassius barked into the comms radio. The Phoenix Foxtrot operator on the other end of the line audibly gulped before stammering out the same statement once more, informing the captain that Ethan Riles had not only abandoned the project, but also stolen their newest manticore in the process. Cassius told Bravo Squad to suit up. They had a traitor to find. Hannah tried talking Cassius down, pleading that they should try contacting Ethan to get his side of the story. The project leader was having none of it. Ethan was not only undermining their efforts, he was now actively sabotaging them. Before the team could leave, the base received an incoming call from an unknown source. Accepting the communication, the Phoenix personnel were greeted by the manic laughter of one Ovwell Kruger. Ovwell was the leader of a small crew of mercenaries. He bragged of his team's recent venture where they were paid to eliminate a Pandoran nest located very close to Phoenix Point itself. He mocked the project, claiming they were incapable of even defending their front doorstep. Evelyn told him he was an idiot, and the project had deliberately left that nest alone in order to study the movements of the creatures coming and going. She told him his team had just destroyed a valuable source of intel. An awkward silence followed before Kruger eventually shrugged and stated, "My bad." His previous bluster had entirely vanished. Cassius warned him to stay out of Phoenix Project business and was about to cut the transmission when Kruger piped up once more. He urged the project to hear him out. His team had proven their capability by destroying the nest. They could make it up to Cassius by aiding the Phoenix Project. Surely the captain needed competent soldiers. And Kruger wasn't even demanding payment in the traditional sense. His team only wanted hot food and warm beds. As much as Cassius's disdain of Ethan was urging him to end the call and begin the pursuit of his prey, he was, above all else, a practical man. Kruger may have been a loudmouth and a fool, but soldiers were soldiers, and Ovwell was correct in his assessment that the project needed as many capable hands as they could get. Cassius reluctantly sighed and told Kruger to bring his team to Phoenix Point. There Cassius would decide if the band of mercenaries was worth his time. Meanwhile, in the Anu haven of Azupiranu, Maddie was introducing Ethan's team to Trite Shine. She refused to divulge what was in the thick purple beverage, but she assured Ethan it would cure him of all his troubles through the power of amnesia. Ethan had lost count of how many mugs deep he was when the crew were approached by an Anu mutant, a priest who called himself the Ward Father. He explained that he had a mission for the team, and he would provide handsome payment for its completion. Sam was eager to hear the details. When the Ward Father explained the mission involved travelling to an Anu holy site that was currently under New Jericho occupation, Ethan immediately rejected the offer. He knew Cassius would want his head on a platter if he caused any issues between New Jericho and the Phoenix Project. Sophia had done enough damage to that relationship already. Sam argued that Cassius likely already wanted him dead for stealing the Manticore, so a skirmish with West's goons at this point would make no practical difference. Besides, the team was out in the cold now. They needed a means to pay their way in the world, and the Ward Father was offering exactly that. But Ethan held firm. He had been irresponsible enough recently, and was adamant that he had learned his lesson. The Ward Father explained to Ethan that a powerful artifact was housed in the occupied temple, one that would give Ethan the answers to his recent nightmares. The young engineer immediately sobered up in response to the priest's words. The father went on and described Ethan's torture in exact detail. The fear of sleep, the unending bombardment of warped and demented images, the horrors of the Pandorans drilling ever deeper into the recesses of his brain. The ward father promised Ethan that this artifact would allow him to conquer his visions. Ethan was deeply suspicious. How could this ward father know, to the tiniest detail, the exact images that haunted his mind? Was the priest using some sort of psychic ability to read Ethan's thoughts? Or was there more to it than that? The engineer's desperation won out, and soon enough, the Ethan Express was airborne once more. Upon arriving at the site, the ward father explained the team would need to fight their way through the New Jericho soldiers. Sneaking past would be too difficult, and the soldiers would not listen to reason. The team, including Maddie, pushed inside the temple. She claimed she had accompanied them for a share of the ward father's promised payment, and that was certainly true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Maddie found herself enamored with Ethan. She couldn't explain it, but for now at least, she was invested in where his journey would take him. The New Jericho Heavy Support had obtained frightening new weaponry, shoulder-mounted missile launchers that could be fired in the blink of an eye. The temple's solid construction was the only thing that kept the group from being blown apart as they hurried into cover. Maddie's spider drones assisted the squad, acting both as scouts and explosive support to shred the heavy troops' armor. This allowed the rest of the team's weaker weapons to punch through what was left of the Heavy's protective gear. Soon nearly the entire New Jericho strike force had been eliminated. Only a single sniper remained. Even facing certain death, he refused to surrender. He blasted away at the team, screaming at them to not come any closer. He threatened that he would take plenty of them down with him if they didn't retreat. The ward father approached the valiant fighter and told him very calmly that there would be no more death on this day. Then the Anu priest simply waved his hand at the sniper. Instantly, the soldier lowered his rifle and allowed the group to pass. Ethan had heard stories of Anu mind control, but to see it in action was a different thing entirely. He had been taught that even God couldn't control free will, and yet this Anu disciple could perform such an act seemingly effortlessly. Before Ethan's brain could fully process what he had witnessed, the ward father insisted that Riles be the one to retrieve the artifact. The team was suspicious of this, Maddie arguing that the priest could grab his prize himself. But the ward father refused. He said Ethan had to be the one to take it. The fate of the world depended on it. Against the protests of his team, and with a heavily sinking stomach, Ethan approached the thick, shimmering glass case that entombed the artifact. The object itself was a leathery-looking husk of contorted grey and purple flesh. It seemed to have undergone some form of embalming, as there was no hint of decay. Sam asked Ethan if he was sure about this, and the engineer responded that he had never been less sure of anything in his life, but he still wanted to proceed. The sniper then blasted a high-powered shot through the protective glass casing, shattering it completely. Ethan reached out and pressed a single index finger to the slab of meat. It took a mere instant for his mind to be consumed. Ethan screamed in agony, falling to the ground and violently projecting blood from his mouth. Sam and Maddie grabbed Ethan's convulsing body, while Dan was about to riddle the ward father with holes for his betrayal. But before the old-timer could act, the entire group was thrown to the floor as the entire building began violently trembling. Debris began falling from the top of the temple, crashing down all around them, the walls shunting left and right, crumbling apart as they did so. Some kind of earthquake was consuming the entire city. They needed to escape as quickly as possible. Back at Phoenix Point, Kruger and his team had arrived. Cassius gave them one glance up and down before telling them to be on their way. Kruger protested, saying the captain hadn't even given them a chance. Cassius informed Kruger that the Phoenix Project was no place for mutants. Seth was clearly hurt, glancing at the ground while making a weak gurgling sound. Mama Crusher threatened to knock Cassius's teeth out, to which Ellis raised his sword. Kruger told both sides to cool it and offered his assurance that Seth hated those Anu cultist freaks, as he referred to them, just as much as Cassius did. That's why Seth had left them to join Kruger's team. Cassius repeated his original instruction for the mercenaries to leave, this time using much stronger language. Marcus said they should go. They clearly weren't welcome at Phoenix Point. Kruger begrudgingly conceded, and his team began heading back to their Helios. And at that exact moment, as if guided by fate itself, almost every alarm throughout the entire base simultaneously erupted into an ear-piercing shriek. One of the comms operators reported that there was extreme seismic activity off the northern coast. The behemoth had emerged from the Arctic Ocean. Phoenix Foxtrot satellites were detecting Pandoran flyers filling the sky. It was an invasion. Cassius ordered his team to gear up. They were leaving in 90 seconds. Tyler Ray, his usual cocky smirk emerging across his face, inquired with the Phoenix captain, "Are you sure you still don't need our help?" Cassius snapped that the group was welcome to aid if they wished, otherwise they could get out of his way. The Manticore and Helios set off to engage the Pandoran onslaught. The return of the gargantuan entity was Cassius's greatest fear, but he had been preparing for it. In conjunction with the Synedrions, the project had fitted a high-powered laser to the Manticore. The team engaged the horde of flyers, Eileen eviscerating them as quickly as a hot knife through butter. While Bravo Squad engaged the flyers above, Kruger's team set down in the New Jericho Haven to offer their assistance on the ground. Mama was able to quickly establish contact with the security personnel on a factory roof. The group found themselves being swarmed by myrmidons careening down from the sky, and that was to say nothing of the Tritons now wielding virus weapons. Bullets fused with a non-contagious variant of the Pandora virus. They were designed to overwhelm the target with cortisol and adrenaline, sending them into a spiral of anxiety and panic. Several members of Bravo Squad implemented the technology in their weapons, but for the Pandorans to be wielding such tools was a disturbing development. No doubt they had obtained the technology from the Anu cultists, who wielded such dangerous weapons regularly. One of the New Jericho personnel immediately succumbed to the fear. Once the roof was reclaimed, Kruger's team launched a pincer strike on the remaining Pandorans. Kruger, Marcus, Tyler, and Seth attacked from the ground level, while Mama and the New Jericho operatives launched their assault from above. The Pandorans' reinforcements were limited thanks to the Charon corpses plummeting from the sky. They couldn't drop reinforcements when they were nothing more than a puddle of entrails splattered across the pavement. Soon enough, the skies began clearing as the remaining Charons retreated. The behemoth's attack had been repelled. For now. After the encounter, Bravo Squad touched down on the ground. Kruger's team had proven their worth in Cassius's eyes, and he offered them a place in the project. Seth, beaming brightly and emitting a delighted shrieking sound, offered his hand for the captain to shake. "Don't push your luck," Cassius replied curtly, before instructing Bravo Squad to return to the Manticore.
There had always been rumors that maybe the Pandora virus wasn't from Earth, that some alien disease had come down from the stars like a plague from heaven. But now that we finally had the evidence we needed, we realized the truth was more terrible than that. The Pandora virus was alien, yes, but it wasn't a disease. It was a bioweapon. We were not alone, and whatever was out there wanted us dead. None of this had deterred Randolph Symes. He continued his quest, hoping that whatever his great-grandfather had buried in Oglethorpe University's time vault held the answers he needed. We would have to hope that he was right.
The scientists at Phoenix Point had finished analysing the data that Alpha Squad had sent them from the locations Symes had visited. They had concluded not just that the Pandora virus was of extraterrestrial origin, a fact that seemed irrefutable given the behemoth had literally fallen from the sky, but also that the structure of the virus's cells indicated an artificial origin. The Pandora virus had been designed. Humanity was facing the deadliest bioweapon ever conceived. Despite Sophia, Jacob, and Omar still feeling weakened from the effects of the Acheron corruption, the team set out to the final location left by Symes. Armageddon wasn't going to wait for them to be feeling better.
The writings of my great-grandfather recount his mission to Oglethorpe University and the Time Vault. It was here in 1936 that he deposited the files, sealed aluminium containers that were locked away to be opened in 1,000 years. Did he know what those files contained? I'm not sure. He was a wily old devil. I have the documents before me now. They prove what I had previously only suspected. A technologically advanced hominin civilization existed on this planet long before Homo sapiens came along. They flourished until something destroyed them. But some of them must have survived, or where did the stories come from? Somehow, they must have won. I know that some of my operatives think I've lost it. It doesn't matter. I have to keep searching. If I find the answer, it'll have all been worth it.
Sophia exploded in an ear-piercing scream of rage and agony, punching a hole straight through the concrete wall of the Time Vault. There was no trace of Symes, just more breadcrumbs to follow in this never-ending goose chase. The squad was far from home, out in the cold, with no end or hope in sight. Sophia couldn't take it anymore. She had reached her breaking point. Jacob put an arm around her as she fell to her knees, failing miserably to hold back hot, stinging tears. How could he do this? Sophia blubbered. He... She broke down in tears once more. I know, Jacob offered his condolences. He abandoned you. He abandoned all of us. Sophia sniffled, looking up at the man she loved. He pressed his forehead to hers and reminded her that the team was still here. They weren't going anywhere, and they needed their squad leader. Sophia embraced Jacob, taking a moment to regain her composure and returning to her feet. She noted that Symes' great-grandfather, the man who had constructed the Time Vault, had a large amount of data on the antediluvian civilization. Even Sophia, who was far from an academic, could see the blatant overlap with Helena's research. The team needed to send this data back to Phoenix Point as a priority. Perhaps Dr. Luansky would be able to assist them in determining where Symes went next. In the meantime, Danchev had one final research location. Sophia instructed the squad they were heading out. Not one of them argued with her decision. Their leader was in pain, and Alpha Squad knew they had to be united now more than ever. Sophia's life may have depended on it. Upon arriving at the outskirts of the site, a hulking mutated Pandoran structure, the group was greeted by a lone Anu priest. Despite the grotesque mutation that had consumed her cranium, she spoke in a soft, comforting voice. The priest introduced herself as the Red Walker. When Sophia inquired what she was doing at this location, Red Walker replied that the Exalted had sent her to the group, just as she had sent the Ward Father to Ethan. Alpha Squad, being on a different continent and most certainly out of the loop on the Phoenix Project's latest developments, were confused at this statement. However, the priest managed to gain Sophia's interest when she stated that Danchev was inside the structure. She told the group she would like to accompany them. Inside the chamber they would find heavy Pandoran presence and would need all the firepower they could get. Sophia agreed the priest could accompany them, but warned her not to try anything underhanded. The Red Walker, through a thin and charming smile, assured the team she was only there to help. Inside the structure were huge crystal-like walls that had been overtaken by repugnant Pandoran mutations. The team immediately found themselves being flanked with abominations trying to encircle them. Irina and Jacob had been working on copying Synedrion's spider drone technology, and Irina quickly deployed 3 of the devices. Just like Red Walker had said, the group was going to need all the firepower they could muster. Sophia and the priest took point position on the right-hand side, while Takeshi and Jacob advanced on the left. The team moved forward hesitantly as they scouted 2 Acherons. Engaging one of these nightmarish things had proven difficult enough. Fending off two at once would no doubt prove Alpha Squad's greatest challenge to date. And what did this say about Danchev? Was he really so insane he would seek out two of these things in the same place at the same time? It didn't take long for the rancid creatures to begin summoning reinforcements. On top of that, the team came across their first siren. Takeshi had read many reports of these highly dangerous specimens, but no one in the group had ever laid eyes on one in the flesh. If the Arthrons were the muscle of the Pandoran armies, the sirens were its brain. Cunning creatures wielding incredible psychic might and walking on talons that could slash through even the most heavily armoured foes. Omar explained that it wasn't too late for them to retreat. Sophia denied his request, insisting the team couldn't leave this infestation in place. It was far too dangerous to the surrounding havens. Omar, against his own wishes, knew the team leader was right. Irina depleted the last of her spider drones, buffing the team's ranks as much as possible. Sophia and Red Walker then began the onslaught, targeting the siren with viral bullets. Disrupting its brain chemistry would limit its psychic potential. Meanwhile, Jacob and Takeshi targeted the first Acheron, while Omar attempted to suppress the creature with a glorious war cry. Irina commanded the spider drones to push forward, creating a line of explosive defense between Alpha Squad and the alien menace. It was at this moment the Acheron Atlas revealed a horrifying new ability. With a thick cloud of Pandoran mist, it was able to raise the slain Arthrons in its vicinity back to life. Jacob screamed in horror as he blasted away at the revived Arthron. What kind of nightmarish power gave a creature the ability to resurrect the dead? The Pandorans truly were driven by an incomprehensible evil. While Jacob suppressed the undead abominations, Takeshi took aim at the source of the ungodly power, the Acheron itself. He blasted the creature, turning it into a rotten pile of death. Despite their best efforts, the remainder of the squad on the right-hand side of the complex was being overwhelmed. Hordes of Arthrons and Tritons pushed forward on their position, while Acheron-induced reinforcements spilled in from the side. Alpha Squad was flanked and vulnerable. What was worse was the second Acheron was still very much alive, and it was continuing to flood the area with an endless supply of abominations. The situation seemed hopeless. Red Walker grabbed Sophia and spoke very matter-of-factly. "We're all going to die in this place, unless you do something to save us." Sophia surveyed the battlefield, her entire being overtaken with despair. The Anu priest was right. More Pandorans were charging full force at the group's side, an army of creatures preparing to attack from their front. This place was a tomb, and Sophia, in all her arrogance and entitlement, had led her team directly into it. The people she loved the most were all going to die, and it was all her fault. No, she wouldn't fail them. She wouldn't abandon them. No matter the cost, Sophia was going to ensure her teammates walked out of this hellscape alive. There was no other acceptable outcome. Suddenly and violently, the living armor squeezed deeply into her flesh. She screamed in pain as the armor punctured right through her skin, like being bitten by 1,000 teeth over her entire body all at once. Her eyes grew wide and black as the armor overwhelmed every ounce of her body with adrenaline. Still twitching in pain, she commanded Omar to launch as many grenades as he could into the enemy's front line. Omar bombarded the Pandorans, and, moving faster than his eyes could track, Sophia immediately erupted with a hail of screeching bullets from the Danchev AR. This weapon wasn't any ordinary gun. It never needed reloading. It absorbed its ammunition directly from the armor itself. A gun that could move as quickly and violently as the now superhuman woman wielding it. The barrage was endless as Sophia stomped forward, obliterating every Pandoran in her way. She turned her attention to the Acheron menace, pounding it with surge after surge of gunfire. The beast screamed and hissed as its body was punctured relentlessly. Even something as mighty as the Acheron was overcome with fear at the unrelenting brutality of Sophia's onslaught, and it quickly attempted to retreat. However, the beast found no quarter, running headlong into Takeshi's shotgun. As the Acheron froze, overcome with futile panic, Irina unloaded her handgun into the beast, annihilating it once and for all. As the massive burst of adrenaline left Sophia's system, she fell to her knees, weakened and on the verge of unconsciousness. Her body and mind were drained. But that was of little consequence. Both the enemy's lines and spirit had been completely shattered by her devastating attack. The team quickly dispatched the few remaining enemies. The Pandoran infestation of this place was now all but extinct. Jacob hurried to check on Sophia, but she insisted she was fine, if a little lightheaded. Red Walker then asked Sophia if she still wanted to meet Danchev. The Alpha Squad leader insisted she did, and the two women, accompanied by Jacob, headed further into the chamber. The rest of the team remained behind to clean up what was left of the crippled Pandoran forces. The trio soon arrived at a small, dirty, and dilapidated den within the chamber. Inside they found the mutilated corpse of Alexander Danchev, no doubt torn apart by the Pandorans he was trying to study. There they found the mad scientist's final artifacts, a second set of living armor, and the Danchev MG, a heavier and even more destructive version of the Danchev AR that Sophia now wielded. On what was left of his person was a datapad containing all of his research notes. It was here Sophia learned the miserable truth. These weapons weren't some divine gift from a noble outcast as she had imagined. The truth was, Danchev had used repurposed siren DNA cells. This allowed the living weapons to emit a signal that stimulated the amygdala, the part of the human brain responsible for anger. As if already knowing what the datapad displayed, Red Walker spoke to Sophia. She explained that Sophia's amygdala being so hyperactive was the reason she could detect the signals of the weapons, while the rest of the team could not. The priest continued that the key to harnessing the living weapons and the true potential of their enormous power was to control her anger, not to let it control her. Otherwise, she would go as mad as Danchev had. Sophia inquired as to how a priest of Anu knew so much about Danchev. A pained look came upon Red Walker's face as she tapped her index finger to the side of her head. "I could hear his thoughts as he died," she explained. The priest continued that she didn't want Sophia to experience the same regret Danchev had known in his final moments on the earth. The weapons had altered his brain chemistry to the point of knowing only perpetual rage. A man turned into a monster, abandoning all those he had ever called friend in exchange for endless suffering. "You make it sound so easy," Sophia muttered, a clear sign of annoyance in her voice. As he took hold of her, Jacob assured Sophia it was easy. "You're not like Danchev. It's not anger that controls you. It's fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of failure." Sophia tried to interject, but Jacob solemnly spoke over the top of her. "I'll always be here, no matter how many times you fail." Red Walker emerged from the chamber almost a full hour before Sophia and Jacob. Irina and Omar were growing suspicious of the Anu priest, but Takeshi assured them everything would be fine. After all, if there had been a problem, the group would have heard the gunfire. Not to mention, if the priest wanted them dead, they already would be. Finally, after a long conversation that would surely remain a secret to all but the two of them, Sophia and Jacob returned to the surface. Sophia offered Danchev's heavy gear to Omar, but he insisted he wanted nothing to do with it. And at that very moment, a giant mass eclipsed the sun. The team readied their weapons, but Red Walker assured them there was no need. A hulking vehicle descended from the sky, an Anu Tiamat, huge airships that could house a large number of troops but were extremely slow-moving. Once landed, several Anu cultists emerged from the craft. They were thin and cloaked in robes, clearly civilians and not combatants. Red Walker asked Sophia to give the Danchev heavy gear to the cultists. Sophia doubtfully asked why she would do such a thing. Red Walker, with her thin and pleasant smile, simply replied, "To show that you're not afraid, of course." Red Walker proposed that in exchange for the gear, she would offer her services to Alpha Squad, for as long as Sophia wished. Against her better judgment, the Alpha Squad leader accepted the deal and handed over the newly acquired artifacts. The cultists thanked her before leaving in the Tiamat. Alpha Squad, including their newest member, climbed aboard their own vessel. Inside the Manticore, Sophia sat next to Jacob, slipping her hand into his and smiling peacefully. She informed the team it was time for them to return home. They deserved that much. Cassius and Ellis stared at one of the many monitors in the Phoenix Point command station. A small blip being detected by the radar network had enthralled the pair. The transmission bared the call sign of the Manticore 3, the ship Ethan had stolen. The signal had been disabled ever since the trader had taken off with the vessel. It would have been an easy task for the man who built the craft. But now, completely out of the blue, it had reactivated. It was simply impossible that this happened on its own. Ethan, for whatever reason, had re-established the connection. Maybe he wants to surrender, Ellis pondered. Cassius agreed that was a definite possibility. Tobias West had ordered Ethan's execution after he led an attack against a New Jericho installation. Cassius had made it very clear he had no intention of opposing the order. Ethan, since the moment he stole the Manticore, was no longer a part of the Phoenix Project, and as a result would receive no protection from them. Amongst the Phoenix personnel, a rumour had spread of Ethan's demise. He was, after all, inside the Anu Temple when the behemoth's trampling had shaken the structure to rubble. The timing was far too coincidental. The behemoth just happened to reawaken at the exact moment Ethan attacked the installation. It didn't add up. Had Ethan's actions somehow awoken the behemoth from its slumber? Regardless of the answers to these questions, Cassius was certain Ethan was alive. The Manticore 3 had fled the scene of the attack, which meant Ethan's team had lived long enough to escape. Life in the wildlands as a fugitive was no doubt a difficult proposition, on top of being hunted by New Jericho no less. Perhaps the boy wanted to come in from the cold, but something intangible in Cassius's gut told him otherwise. Ethan, for all his faults, was no fool. He was smart enough to know Cassius wanted him dead, and a meeting between the two would not go well for the former engineer. Something wasn't right. The captain ordered Bravo Squad to suit up. They could be walking into a trap. Meanwhile, Kruger Squad, whose official designation was Charlie Squad despite no one on the team accepting that title, had been assigned their first official mission as part of the Phoenix Project. They were assisting the reconstruction efforts at Ginsburg. The water levels had receded, and what was left of the buildings were being repaired and returned to their former glory. Ginsburg was both a scientific and manufacturing hub for Synedrion, and despite the terrible losses of both human life and infrastructure that the city had sustained from the behemoth's initial attack, the faction was determined to rebuild. Nikolai, the most outspoken proponent of the terraformers, had been particularly insistent on the reconstruction efforts. It wasn't glamorous work, but protecting a vulnerable city from bandit raids was important, and the team were happy to help for that reason. Additionally, the mist was spreading even further, and with it, the Acheron's corruption had made its way into the atmosphere. Despite having never come across one of the creatures in person, the entirety of Kruger Squad had been infected by the corruption when they ventured into the Pandoran nest. It left the group feeling lethargic and weak. In truth, the team was happy to be on an assignment where the most difficult task was helping to lift a heavy object. It made for a nice change of pace over fighting for their very lives. However, the team was forced into action when sirens rang out across the city, indicating an attack. What was it about this place? Why did the Pandorans keep returning? There was no time to ponder such things, as Mama took position on a roof to scout the area, finding a hulking Chiron. It rained poison worms down on the squad, while Myrmidons swarmed around one of the Ginsburg snipers. Mama flew to the sniper's side, aiding her in fending off the flying abominations. But as the duo attempted to reposition, a Triton slithered over the building wall, blasting the sniper to bits. Mama hit back with a grenade, destroying the roof and sending the beast plummeting, shattering its bones on impact. The creature writhed in agony until it was no longer breathing. Tyler Ray, on the other side of the battlefield, had found a new way to deal with the Pandoran worms. A young Synedrion woman, who was perhaps more than a friend, had gifted Tyler a neural pistol. This weapon was capable of paralyzing an opponent. He used the weapon with great efficiency to paralyze the worms. Thanks to the information obtained from Alpha Squad's captured Acheron, the Phoenix Project scientists believed that they could temporarily remove the effects of the creature's corruption using live Pandoran specimens. The more the team was able to capture, the sooner they could be free from their miserable state. In a combined effort of Synedrion and Phoenix Project strength, the invaders were repelled. In the wake of the fight, the people of Synedrion were left feeling more demoralized than ever. The Pandorans, for whatever reason, clearly wanted this city in ruins, and the people of Ginsburg knew the abominations, sooner or later, would return once more. A never-ending onslaught was all the future had to offer these people. Ovwell encouraged the Synedrions not to lose hope. He said they beat the foul beasts back once, and they could do it 100 more times if they had to. The important thing was that humanity never surrendered. Victory or the blazing glory of defeat were their only options. Kruger then proceeded to raid the nearest bar and ensured the Synedrions became very, very drunk. Many leagues away, Bravo Squad was touching down at the site of the stolen Manticore. Sure enough, there it was, in near pristine condition. The team quickly found themselves greeted by two men. One was an Anu mutant priest, no doubt this Wardfather character the only surviving New Jericho security operative had described. The other man was coated in glowing golden armor. Cassius ordered the pair to raise their hands, to which the mutant complied. The second man, however, ignored the instruction and simply removed his helmet. Hannah audibly gasped. It was Ethan, but not as the project had known him. His hair, down to his eyebrows, had turned completely white. Gone was the hunched posture and nervous twitch, replaced only with a menacing calm. Cassius barked they were taking Ethan in and handing him over to New Jericho. "I'm afraid that's impossible," the man spoke. "For Ethan Riles is already dead. I am the Light Walker." Ethan, or the Light Walker as he now described himself, proceeded to apologize for his actions against New Jericho. He said he understood he had put Cassius in a difficult position, and to help rectify the matter, he was returning the Manticore that he borrowed. Evelyn corrected him, reminding him he had stolen the Manticore. The Light Walker concurred, but insisted that it was necessary. The attack on New Jericho had awoken his mind and allowed him to see the true face of their enemy. He had touched its flesh and now knew the true horror of the foe they faced. He had gathered Bravo Squad here today to show them he was their ally. He explained that this facility housed the blueprints of an ancient weapon, designed by the same antediluvian civilization that had obsessed both Symes and Helena. Something that could help the project in their war against the Pandorans. And, the Lightwalker assured Cassius, humanity would need every advantage it could find. The conversation was cut short by a series of bullets flying past the group. Cassius ordered the squad to take cover, and they quickly ran into a nearby building. A group of bandits had taken up residence at the site and were wasting no time in trying to dispatch the intruders. The Lightwalker, equipping his helmet once more, promised to aid Bravo Squad in the battle. Cassius said he would deal with Ethan after the bandits were no more. Lightwalker and Wardfather proved their worth in the battle, charging to the front line. Lightwalker annihilated one of the bandits' marksmen with his custom-made assault rifle. Wardfather inflicted a second with a huge amount of viral bullets, causing him to spiral into a fit of screaming terror. Hammer was then able to make quick work of the raider. The Lightwalker encouraged Cassius to access the barely functional lockbox in the main building. Sure enough, Cassius found the remains of an ancient artifact, along with a datapad, no doubt containing all the information the government of the Old World had obtained on the item. With the artifact secured and the bandits dealt with, Bravo Squad regrouped with Lightwalker and Wardfather. Cassius asked, very bluntly, what the hell was going on? Ethan explained touching the flesh of the divine that New Jericho had stolen from the disciples had changed him. His true psychic potential had been illuminated to him, and he was a new man. He had met personally with the Exalted, the leader of the disciples of Anu, and she had provided him with the location of several extremely powerful artifacts, the first of which Cassius was now holding. These weapons were designed by a civilization far more advanced than humanity, and if the Phoenix Project could learn how to make more, the human race might just have a chance at survival. Lightwalker was very upfront about the fact he and Wardfather could order the entire squad to execute themselves on the spot if they wished. He told Cassius that if the captain intended to shoot, he should do so now. Otherwise, Lightwalker was going to take his leave. There were more artifacts to be secured, and time was short. Several tense moments passed, the sweat visibly trickling down Cassius's forehead as he pointed his rifle squarely on the man formerly known as Ethan Riles. Eventually, he spat angrily on the ground and lowered his weapon. Without a word, the two outsiders turned on the spot and began walking away. Hannah called out to Lightwalker, stopping the duo in their tracks. "Are you really our friend?" she asked. Lightwalker replied that before the war was over, Bravo Squad would come to understand that Cassius had made the correct decision on this day. Then, without warning, an Anu Tiamat appeared from over the hills. Lightwalker explained his new ship had arrived, the Ark, his own refuge in the ocean of violence that had drowned the world, and so he would now be on his way. As the duo moved away at a brisk pace, Bravo Squad was left speechless and utterly bewildered. Evelyn asked what exactly had just happened here. Cassius replied that today they had either made a powerful friend or a truly dreadful enemy.
Although it's over now, don't let it get you down. We'll be back around. For now we can feel some sorrow. A new day, it starts tomorrow. We'll wake up, new dreams to follow. A new goal and brand new motto. One last time, let's live for something. I can feel my blood, it's rushing. This ain't goodbye, we'll be back someday.
Alpha Squad's journey back to Phoenix Point had been the polar opposite of their travels while leaving the base. There was a sense of calm in Sophia that Jacob hadn't seen since before Symes had left Phoenix Point. This resonated with the entire team. Sophia had apologized to the group for the way she had treated them. She admitted she had pushed them too hard and had been far too reckless. The leader insisted that was never going to happen again. Alpha Squad spent their time cooped up in the Manticore, joking, laughing, and singing. Even Red Walker was getting along seamlessly with the group, regaling them with tales of her time in the Anu church, and perhaps embellishing these stories ever so slightly. Upon reaching the base, Sophia walked with an uneasiness in her stomach. She didn't know exactly how Cassius would respond to the presence of a mutant amongst their ranks, but she knew it wouldn't be positive. She was then quite surprised when she entered the base and found an Anu mutant, who she would later come to know as Seth, engaged in a heated chess match with Helena. Further into the complex, Alpha Squad encountered a gaunt-looking Cassius sat hunched over the base's round table. Hannah was gently massaging his shoulders as his ringed, sullen eyes hovered over several computer monitors. He looked up at Sophia, clearly exhausted. He welcomed the team back and informed them there had been some situational developments during their absence. After getting the squad caught up on the return of the Behemoth, the attack on Ginsburg, and Ethan Ryle's questionable behaviour, he added one final, very important detail. "Takeshi," the captain spoke, "I'm removing you from Alpha Squad."